Hey everybody, Nick Espinosa, your Chief Security Fanatic here, and it is Sunday, so we are doing Breaches of the Week. And as always, before we begin, I'd like to thank the following people that sent me a lot of this information and also sent me a whole bunch of other really interesting things for the week. It's always appreciated. It always helps me out. And that would be Jason Dance, Chris Fallon, Barrett Peterson, Jacqueline Wolf, Steve Jordan, and Kaylee Hilson. Guys, thank you so much. And with that, let's dive right into it with what is one of the more amusing data breaches of the week, and that would be Strip Chat. Apparently, this is one of the internet's top 5 adult cam sites, and they suffered a security breach that leaked the personal data of millions of users and also the models. Now, basically what happened here was StripChat had an Elasticsearch database cluster on the internet without a password for more than 3 days between November 4th and November 7th of basically this year. Now, what was exposed and possibly scraped was data of 65 million users registered to the site. We're talking usernames, emails, IP addresses, tip balance, account creation date, last login date, account status, etc. Also, the data of 421,000 models that actually broadcast on that site, their username, their gender, their studio ID, I'm guessing various studios connect to this, live status, tip menus, prices, and actually their score, because apparently you can score them. Now, they're also the data of 134 million transactions. This is basically information on tokens and tips paid by users to the models, including private tips, and data on about 719,000 chat messages saved in a moderation database. The user and model ID involved in the conversations were also tagged to the chat. So obviously that's a huge thing, and if you're one of the 65 million people apparently, or 421,000 models that use that platform StripChat, heads up to you. Moving on. Let's talk about Discord. This is basically the communications platform. A ton of people use it. The operators, interestingly enough, of Python Package Index have removed this week 11 Python libraries from their portal for various malicious behaviors, including the collection and theft of user data, passwords, and Discord access tokens, and the installation of remote access shells, basically from infected systems. Now, essentially, the security team at the DevOps platform JFrog found these and basically noted that these packages were installed more than 30,000 times before they were essentially spotted and reported, meaning if you've installed add-ons or linked Discord in some way, shape, or form using one of these libraries from that platform, the Python Package Index, you may have an infection that is stealing your information or giving them access into your computer systems. Please go check that out, Discord users that basically install integrations. Moving on. Let's talk about fat pipe networking devices, because the FBI said that it discovered an advanced persistent threat abusing a zero-day vulnerability in fat pipe networking devices as a way to breach companies and gain access to their internal networks. Now, the FBI said that the vulnerability allowed a hacking group to exploit a file upload function in the device's firmware and then install basically a web shell that gave them root access to the device. The FBI said that it spotted the attackers abusing this against FatPipe MP VPN devices, but this vulnerability is also in other products by FatPipe, including IPVPN and Warp, W-A-R-P. And so if you have FatPipe products, please make sure you're updating them, or you too could be hacked. Moving on. Let's talk about Utah Imaging Associates, Inc. They are obviously out of Utah, specifically Farmington, and they do radiology. They learned that an attacker gained access to sensitive personal information of former and current patients. They may have gained access to basically personal information of these patients as well, and this has potentially affected 583,643, mostly Utahns. So heads up to you if you use Utah Imaging Associates out of Farmington, Utah. Moving on. Let's talk about California Pizza Kitchen, because they just revealed a data breach that exposed the social security numbers of over 103,000 current and former employees. The company said it learned of a disruption to its systems on September 15th and obviously moved to secure the environment. By October 4th, they had determined that cyber criminals had basically gotten in and gained access to certain files, including employee names and social security numbers. 250 locations across 32 states here in the U.S. So if you've worked for California Pizza Kitchen, you definitely want to check in. Moving on. Let's talk about Mozilla Firefox users. If you're using Firefox, heads up to you. This is an interesting one because thousands of Firefox cookie databases, which contain sensitive data that could potentially be used to hijack authenticated sessions, are essentially available on request from GitHub repositories. Now, if you're a regular user and have no idea what GitHub is, you probably can ignore the next 30 seconds of this. If you use GitHub and Mozilla Firefox, please keep paying attention. As reported, and first spotted by security engineer Aidan Marlin, the cookies.sqlite databases are used to store cookies between browsing sessions and are normally found in a user's Firefox profiles folder. However, though, by searching GitHub using specific query parameters known as a search dork, they can actually be found online. Now, essentially, the affected users accidentally uploaded their own cookies.sqlite database when committing code and pushing it to their public repository on GitHub, and there's about 4,500 of you that have been affected. So you might have accidentally pushed your cookies up to your public repository on GitHub. Heads up to you if, like I said, you use Firefox and GitHub as well. Here we are. Moving on, and you can all now once again pay attention. Let's talk about the Conti ransomware gang, because the Conti ransomware group just suffered an embarrassing data breach after a security firm was able to identify the real IP addresses of one of its most sensitive servers and then gain console access to the affected system for more than a month. Now, the exposed system, called a payment portal or recovery site, is where the Conti gang tells its victims to visit in order to negotiate ransom payments. Their IP addresses were exposed and found to be running on a Ukrainian hosting provider known as ITL LLC. They dumped them, and now Conti is looking for a new host. And so hopefully, there you go. It's my smallest violin ever for the Conti ransomware gang. Obviously, they're ripping people off for millions, so hopefully they're caught and arrested. Moving on. I actually want to do a bit of a segment here on what I'm calling the vulnerability roundup for the week as well, because we have some vulnerabilities that can get you breached, and therefore, because of these vulnerabilities, people have been breached. We just don't quantify it yet. The first one up is networking equipment vendor Netgear. They just patched the 5th set of dangerous remote code execution bugs in small to home office routers this year. This is their 5th time doing this. They are running very vulnerable. 61 different router and modem models need patching. If you have a Netgear, you better check in and make sure that your Netgear is fully up to date. Moving on. Intel, the microprocessor maker, has disclosed 2 high-severity vulnerabilities that affect a wide range of Intel processor families, allowing threat actors and malware to gain basically elevated privilege on your device or your computer. So, if your computer has one of these, or server has one of these processors, you definitely want to make sure you're updating it. Basically, the Xeon processor families E, E3, V6, and W, as well as Xeon scalable processors 3rd generation. Also, 11th generation Intel Core processors, 10th generation Intel Core processors, 7th generation Intel Core processors, Intel Core X series processors, Celeron processor N series, and Pentium Silver processor series are all affected by this. If you have one of those, check in with Intel and make sure you're updating. Also, around 6 million Sky Broadband customers were exposed to a security flaw that could have allowed attackers to control millions of basically hubs or modems from Sky Broadband for about 18 months. So if you use Sky, I believe they're out of the UK, definitely make sure you're updating that modem or router that they gave you. Moving on, no more roundup for that. Let's talk about various Israeli entities, because a new hacker group named Moses Staff has recently claimed responsibility for numerous attacks against Israeli entities which appear politically motivated, as they do not actually go for ransomware demands. The threat actors have reportedly caused damage to Israeli systems in the past couple of months, infiltrating networks and encrypting files and then leaking stolen copies to the public. As such, the group's apparent motive is to cause maximum operational damage and damage to its targets by exposing corporate secrets and other sensitive information via dedicated leak sites, Twitter accounts, and Telegram channels. Moses Staff appears to be using publicly available exploits for known vulnerabilities that remain unpatched on public-facing infrastructure. So, for example, the hacking group was targeting Microsoft Exchange servers because Microsoft recently disclosed a massive vulnerability. A lot of people did not update their Exchange servers, and here we are. This really underscores the need to make sure that everything is up to date in your ecosystem, your firewalls, your computers, all this kind of stuff. We patch primarily for security, secondarily for features and performance. Never forget it. Moving on. I want to give you guys an update on TikTok because TikTok users may be eligible for a share of the $92 million that basically a class action lawsuit has basically settled with them. Now, the settlement stems from 21 separate lawsuits accusing TikTok of violating federal and state law by collecting and using personal data without, quote, sufficient notice and consent. This past Monday, TikTok released a notice on its app directing affected users to TikTokDataPrivacySettlement.com. Now, according to that website, all persons who reside in the United States and use TikTok prior to September 30th of this year may be eligible for part of a payment. Now, users who live in Illinois, for example, may be entitled to 6 times as much money as non-Illinois residents because the state is the only one in the nation that, quote, allows people to sue companies for violating biometric privacy laws. That's right, here in Illinois, if you recall, I'm in Chicago, we have the Biometric Information Privacy Act. This is also why Facebook owes me a lot of money. Still haven't seen that check. Moving on, let's talk about the Indonesian police because they are investigating claims by basically an attacker who said this week that they had stolen the personal data of thousands of Indonesian police officers, the latest in a spate of cyber attacks that has highlighted the country's digital vulnerabilities. Using a now suspended Twitter handle, an attacker who said they were from Brazil claimed to have obtained data on 28,000 police officers by infiltrating Indonesia's police server, according to local media reports. That's all I know at this time, but if you have anything to do with Indonesian police or law enforcement, heads up to you. You may have had your information exposed. For what reason? I'd like to know. Moving on, let's talk about Stanford University because the FBI is investigating a security breach at Stanford that resulted in the theft of personal data, including letters of recommendation and social security numbers for roughly 10,000 people. Now, this happened on May 11th when somebody from outside the university gained access to the school's network. That is according to their general counsel. The university would not say whether the breach happened as a result of a remote hacker, the physical theft of a laptop, or other typical means of network penetration. So we don't know exactly what happened at Stanford, but if you go there, you might want to check in or have anything to do with them. You might be one of the 10,000 that had a letter of recommendation. So I'm thinking prospective students and social security numbers, which prospective students would also submit to a university in application. So there you go, Stanford University. Heads up. And finally, and we've got two big finalies for you today. One of them I really do have to go through, so we'll do that one last. But I want to talk first about the FBI. Several private sector cybersecurity officials at businesses woke up this past Saturday, meaning a week ago, to a frightening but fake alert. The FBI is investigating a, quote, sophisticated chain attack, and everybody is vulnerable. But here's the thing. The message was fake, and it was actually sent by attackers who gained access into the FBI's email system, underscoring the critical vulnerabilities that still exist in federal systems, basically a year after SolarWinds. We're almost a year off of SolarWinds, and it's still hot news. Now, here's how it started. Attackers sent thousands of emails to private sector's organizations that past Saturday morning, and basically about a fake cyber attack, and that is according to email security watchdog Spamhaus, and they were the first to report it that day. Now, the fake emails then prompted a wave of calls to managed security service providers, and here we are. The FBI said in an elaborated statement this past Sunday, meaning a week ago, that hackers gained access to its law enforcement enterprise portal over the weekend through a software misconfiguration, allowing them to send fake emails about a cybersecurity supply chain attack that wasn't actually happening, or possibly other emails as well, but that's the one they're talking about. Now, the FBI has provided several updates over that past weekend about the incident, and while the investigation is still ongoing, the FBI said it's warned partners about the fake messages and, quote, quickly remediated the software's vulnerability and confirmed the integrity of our networks. The FBI also said that no personal data or personal information was compromised in the attack. CISA Director Jen Easterly also said that the agency is, quote, aware of this incident and stands ready to support as needed. So hopefully the FBI will get it locked down, but it really underscores the vulnerabilities that we have even in our federal law enforcement, which you think would be completely on the ball, and quite frankly, they usually are. I've worked with the FBI on cases before. They've always been incredibly professional, so hopefully they'll get back on their feet and fully lock that down. Obviously, give themselves a good audit and review. Moving on. We're going to our other finally, and okay, I have to talk about this unfortunately, but we're going to be discussing the election of 2020 because here we go again. There's new information and facts as it's basically being reported, and so I'm going to lay this out as it's being reported. Again, I do not care what your position is on the 2020 election. I'm just talking about the facts here. You can make up your own mind. So what we're talking about here is screenshots of information taken from Lake County, Ohio's computer systems that ended up on display at Mike Lindell, aka the My Pillows guy, Cyber Symposium, where Mr. Lindell said they would demonstrate election fraud. If you recall, I've written articles on this. I watched the entire Cyber Symposium all 3 days. I live tweeted on this. I have a lot of thoughts on that. I did not see any credible evidence whatsoever, and I'm leaving it at that. You can go read my tweets. You can go read the article I wrote at smirconish.com specifically on that. Now, back to the facts at hand. Lake County, Ohio Auditor Christopher Galloway immediately began working with Lake County's Board of Elections and the Ohio Secretary of State's office to figure out what happened. Basically meaning, why are there screenshots from Lake County, Ohio? We need to figure this out. What happened? The Cyber Symposium did not show election fraud, as I mentioned, and the Lake County information displayed had nothing to do with the county's elections, which run on a separate computer system from the rest of the county, meaning the information screenshots shown had nothing to do with the election system. That has now been confirmed by the county. Now, Galloway says that someone in Lake County Commissioner's office plugged a non-county laptop into an Ethernet port from 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. on the day of Ohio's May 4th privacy and recorded the equivalent of computers and printers talking over each other at a time when nobody was there. Essentially what he's talking about is a packet capture. They were talking quite a bit about this at the Cyber Symposium and how the packet captures would prove everything. For the record, they don't, but here we are. And essentially you have free utilities like Wireshark, which is what they were using at the Cyber Symposium. So I'm willing to bet, even though it doesn't say it, that essentially Wireshark was used simply to capture traffic as it was moving across the network, where it's going from point A to point B, and here we are. Now, whoever did this, according to what I've read, used a scanning program to manually pull the packets of data. That, again, packet capture, that's what you use Wireshark for. That's probably the most popular one on the planet. And Galloway said, and I quote, "They just got a lot of nothing. It was some copier talking to a desktop saying, 'I'm still here waiting for you to send me a print job.'" And that's essentially what a lot of packet captures will show. It will show the request from a computer to a printer and a printer responding, and essentially the traffic that is generated, in between this. Actually gathering what is sent from the computer to the printer is another manner. You can run packet captures and retrieve that. If it's encrypted data, depending on how it's encrypted, it may not be able to be captured through a packet capture. And again, I'm not going to get all nerdy and technical on this. They just got a basic packet capture that was showing and recording traffic A to B. Odds are they weren't actually capturing packets, just showing the protocols moving back and forth. But again, I'm speculating on that one because that's what I've told you that I'm quoting is exactly what is being reported. Now, this breach has triggered a federal and state probe that was first reported this past Friday by the Washington Post, which revealed that public record requests show that John Hamercheck, a Lake County commissioner and retired police officer, used his security badge to swipe into the fifth floor offices several times during the time when the leaked data showed the laptop was intermittently connected to the county network. The Post report said the Lake County episode bore, quote, "striking similarities to an incident in Colorado earlier this year when government officials helped an outsider gain access basically to the county voting system in an effort to find fraud." Essentially, the people who believe there was election security breaches are actually causing election security breaches, and here we are. And unfortunately, we are not done with this situation because there's more news on this front coming from the aforementioned Colorado. Federal, state, and local authorities searched the home of Mesa County, Colorado clerk Tina Peters and 3 of her associates this past Tuesday as part of an investigation into accusations the elected official was involved in voting machine security breaches, according to an official who helped conduct the searches. Now, the FBI carried out a court-ordered search of Peters' home in Mesa County earlier Tuesday morning, leaving her quote-unquote terrified, Peters said in an appearance on Lindell TV. That's the online channel run by Mike Lindell, aka My Pillow CEO. There you go. Obviously, Mike Lindell very much saying that the election was stolen. Tina Peters was actually at the Cybersecurity Symposium, And while I was watching it, they actually shut down one of their attempted demonstrations because they had literally gotten word live that Tina Peters was now going to be questioned and subpoenaed by law enforcement for essentially violating election security integrity. That which she is claiming other people are doing, she was apparently doing. And I quote the DA basically talking to a local Colorado publication. This is DA Dan Rubenstein in Mesa County. Quote, "We executed 4 federally court-authorized operations today to gather evidence in connection with the investigation into the Mesa County Clerk and Recorder's Office. We did so with the assistance from the DA's office, from the 21st Judicial District, the Attorney General's office, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation." He also added that one of the searches occurred in neighboring Garfield County, where I presume one of the employees that works in Mesa County lives. Now, Mike Lindell said that one of the homes raided, not his home, one of the homes raided by law enforcement authorities belonged to Sharona Bishop, a Garfield County resident and former campaign manager for U.S. Representative Lauren Boebert. She is also known as one of the QAnon Republicans as well. So there you go. As we are talking about this, I have yet to see any credible evidence that would basically have a sustainable chain of custody that I could examine. I was actually really excited to watch Mike Lindell's cybersecurity symposium back in, I think it was like July or August or whatever it was, specifically because he said he'd be bringing the evidence. And given what I do for my day job, I was very much looking forward to reviewing that evidence that he said would be widely distributed. We could download it. We could look at it ourselves. I was looking forward to doing that, and we got absolutely nothing, including cybersecurity professionals there that were basically live tweeting on top of me live tweeting it, as I was watching it remotely, saying, yeah, we didn't get anything either. There was no second room where, we were doing things. We got a lot of demonstrations, but a demonstration of how to do something doesn't mean that it's actually done. I can show you how to break into my car. That doesn't mean you've broken into my car. In the same way that a vulnerability, if we understand a vulnerability is out there and it needs to be fixed, a vulnerability doesn't necessarily mean that something's been exploited. I can leave my car unlocked all night. That doesn't mean anybody opened the door and took anything out of it. Here we are. I'm still waiting for that evidence, and I'm, again, not trying to adjudicate the 2020 election. You can believe whatever you want. I'm just saying, if I were to walk into court as an expert and testify, I would have nothing that I could credibly say that counts as evidence that I have seen. I'd love to see it. If you've got it, let me know. Those were your breaches of the week. I hate to end on election news, but it's got to be done. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP. And please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe, stay online, and please stay private. Thanks, everyone.